vanished on me because I tried it and it was like, I can't see where it is. I can't see where it is. All right, let me get the share link. Copy. Vanished on me because I tried it and it was like, I can't see where it is. I can't see where it is. All right, let me kill the echoing live stream. Let me use buffer to share. Slightly annoying that you can't don't think it's got a consistent kind of no, buffer wants to do tons of uh validate I exist. All right.
Paul is here.
Yeah.
I am. Am I
Um,
on mute is the real question. It looks like my mic is working. Maybe.
Hey, Paul.
Hey, mate. How are you?
All right. I'm just uh trying to share. We are Brighter Catch Up is live for the two viewers that are basically us. Uh, all right. That's published. Who knows when it will arrive? Let's reshare. Okay. All right. Here is our magic list of what is happening and going on. All right. Um, Usual policy is kind of work up from the bottom. We may not need, let's only hop into them because we've got quite a few now if we want to actually talk deeply about them. Okay. Uh, Support for Apache Pulsar. I guess that's sitting waiting for you to do your generic test suites, Rafa.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, cool. Specification driven development. What that actually is before skills existed, I had an idea which is similar to skills, which would be to say, if you want to create a producer, how would you do it? What's the instructions for that? So that's what that is. I'm waiting a little bit for Rafa's generated tests to come along so that effectively we can give skills plus generated tests to an agent and then say, go and build an IO for us. So I really want to see how far we can get with a kind of a factory model towards onboarding new transports, even new storage would come up. I just happen to start working on the gateways because I think there's a bigger target space than the outboxes. Okay. Add support to configuration brighter from I configuration. Has Tom's work meant that this PR is no longer relevant, Rafa? I mean, this one a little bit. I know that Toby and I gave you feedback that we didn't want to depend on um, config structures because we like to have config in code and then lean out. I've seen a couple of good examples recently where people are doing that kind of thing where they say, here is my in-code config, but where it says connection string equals, you can get that out of the config. That's what we were after. Is that parked or
Yeah. I think my idea was first to integrate with Aspire, then I extend this to the whole configuration. So yeah,
yeah, I
uh,
don't it's one I wonder whether you might want to come back to at some point uh, with that feedback and say the way I want to change this is so that actually we're still doing config by code, but we're pulling the values that the config by code uses out of configuration. So when I've got, say, an AMQP string for RabbitMQ, I pull that out of config, and that's got a well-known location, and then we can effectively pull that from Aspire. that's the way to do it. The way that this was going, do you remember we had that whole session about it, was saying I want to define objects in configuration and just load Brighter from the config file. And we said we don't want to do that because we deliberately made a choice to have config in code, not config by a config file, but the values of the properties in our configuration can be set from the configuration chain. So I'm interested in this work, but what we wanted to do is pull from the chain. Does that make sense? So we might pick that up again. Performance testing. Coming, it's on an agent. I kind of stopped because it was less priority and I had more things in I now got so many things in progress with agents that so this one was really we had a few reports of memory leaks. That was before Tom did his work, and I wanted to basically say, okay, agent, can you set us up a performance testing suite? So that's what this is. I will come back to it. There were some other things I needed to get out the door first, and the agents reached a point where I need to really help it debug doing that because it's trying to start up a web project and it's getting some fails on doing that. So what it's going to try and do is run some of our samples and determine whether or not that we've got leaks. There are also some tests which just work against classes and looking at dispose patterns and that kind of thing. But the idea with that would be to run that, say, I don't know, one before a release, right? And then check that we haven't basically worsened from and got leaks happening in our memory. Analyzer, I think we should, I need to check on this one again. There's a slight problem of, unless someone does an at, we don't see something. So he was getting stuck in the merge key problem. And in fact, one of us might need to just update his project and merge it for him. So this is actually quite useful in this era, I think. So he wanted to create a Roslyn analyzer that would effectively warn you about common Brighter errors. Now that's really useful for human beings. It's also really useful for agents because if you get an agent to write some Brighter code and a Roslyn analyzer then pops back a load of warnings, you can ask it to address the warnings that say things to it like, hey, you've not set a type on the producer. So it's worth us figuring out how to get him over the line because I think he's suffering from merge problems. He's only got about one rule in there. The idea is to create something we can add new rules to. This one by Simon, I think we gave some feedback. It's not a priority for me now because Simon's just tending to chunk through a whole load of stuff. We will come back to it, pick it up because there are various warnings we're getting. Universal scheduler, right? So this is one of the two big ones I'm working on right now. So this is the one that says when we do requeue with delay. By the way, do stop me and ask questions about ones that you're interested in finding out more about. When we get requeue with delay, previously the problem has been that only worked if the underlying transport supported requeue with delay. And it's this overall problem that we're fixing across a number of stories here, which is we sort of said if your transport doesn't support it, even though our channel abstraction says it's there and you can throw a defer message action, we'll do nothing. So in the event that basically your transport doesn't support it. So you throw a defer message action on Kafka, we would just do nothing, right? We'd be like, well, there is no defer on Kafka, so it doesn't do anything for you, right? Just represents the message. So now, because Rafa put the scheduler stuff in, what I've done is gone and plugged schedulers in everywhere, even including to the in-memory stuff. The in-memory stuff now everything now uses all the consumers now use a producer. If you say delay, if it doesn't have a native transport support, then it will say, right, okay, I'm going to use create a producer. If you've given me a scheduler, I can create a producer and I can produce with delay, right? And it still falls back to, hey, you didn't give me any kind of scheduler. I can't create a producer. I would send immediately, but we'll use the in-memory scheduler if you give us nothing, right? So in principle, they all now support defer message action with delay. It's just if you don't give us a persistent scheduler, your risk is if you crash, any scheduled messages will get lost. But it makes it consistent. and it uses all Rafa's work on creating schedulers and having our producers plugged into the schedulers. In there as well, there's also some fixes for flaky tests in on the uh, transport tests. And that's solely because I kept bumping into I can't tell what's going on now because there are blinkers, and I can't see which things I'm affecting, which things are not. So where there were blinker tests that were failing under some circumstances, I've just set my agent loose on fix this, and iterate until you basically have fixed it. So it'll help overall. They are in there because I can't clearly see what tests I'm causing by the universal schedule delay and what I'm causing by the things until I clean those up, right? And don't want to go over on a entirely separate branch to do all of those. So that's fixing some of the transport tests as well. Rafa, this one is you.
Yeah, so it's a work in progress. So I have made a first list of messaging gateway tests on RabbitMQ to prove it's going to work. So I need to review. I didn't have time yet. So I'm probably going to do today to look at this, see what's wrong, if something else is wrong. Then I will ask it to people review again before I merge these to master and make this ready for review. So like a first review just to see if there is more inconsistency. Then I'm going to change for ready for review.
So, I mean, interestingly enough, on Universal Scheduler, it picked up a couple of tiny errors in the outboxes that were causing blinking tests just because I was not precise about which blinking tests I needed it to fix. But I fixed them anyway. But interestingly enough, what it had to do was use your test generator. And I had to, it was a bit confused because it didn't really understand what it was supposed to be doing. So I pointed it at the ADR and said, here's the ADR, here's the test generator project. And it read those and goes, great, I can figure that out now. And went and basically altered the test generator, rolled out the test to all of the fix in the test to all of the various projects. So it's worked it out. And then I said to it, okay, update agent instructions. So unfortunately it's in there, but this is the first one I need to merge. Update agent instructions. So dot agent instructions is where we put our common instructions so we can reference them from Claude, from OpenCode. So Claude and OpenCode are the main two we support. Specific skills and commands, etc. And so that it now knows how do I work with the generated tests, all right? Which is really useful because having figured it out once, I've told it that information, and so in future it won't get stuck in a loop if no one's monitoring it going, I don't know how to work with generated tests. That's really cool. It's really cool. It worked very well, Rafa. So it just said, oh, I need to do this, I need to go and I need to generate them all again with this fix. I need to run all the tests. It was really happy. So good news, mate. Toby is in Singapore. I'm not quite sure where he is on this. We were giving him feedback on a few tweaks. I think this is good. I mean, it's basically improving our docs and our ability to onboard people, which is our biggest crisis, is that we have lots of actually quite good docs, but people don't read them. So um, uh, we mean to steer a little bit more on the front page. I at some point cut the front page for way down because I wanted everyone to go and read our docs, which I thought would just have the one page to update, the one thing to update the whole time. But it turns out people can't be asked to read docs, so that it may help if Toby steers them a bit. That's the same for modernized command processor samples. So we will let Toby enjoy his holiday with Dom in Singapore. Tag-based cleanup for orphan resources. I think I could have merged this, but I don't know why I didn't. Okay. So again, it really just me handing a task because I had some tokens to burn. Um, there's a script that I have to run every so often, which basically goes through and says, delete all the um, resources that are basically have just ended up lying around due to failed test runs in my AWS account. And it's a pain, particularly if other people are getting AWS test failures, don't realize I'm not around, can't run the script themselves, etc. So what we've got in now is this adds to the CI, a cleanup process. And we've actually got better tagging in this one of our AWS resources so that it tells you clearly we've created them as part of a test. So this script can go and find them and remove all the tagged resources from my AWS account. And it will just run that in every CI so that if the AWS tests fail for some reason, it will just clean them up. Right? And you might find it doesn't run for some reason and it's a couple of passes before it cleans it up. But we shouldn't get into the situation where I run out of basically capacity on my account and we block the tests in future. So that's just a general cleanup action. It's mostly around CI stuff. It's also there's some code changes around um, tagging resources, and there's a change to some of the AWS stuff just because the I can't remember whether it was SNS. I think my SNS or SQS, one of them, it was hard to from the right place add it in the tests, add a tag. So that's got fixed as well. Yeah, just I mean, we still have this one's interesting to talk about because we have to kind of do the AWS SDK stuff manually via macro because we're supporting 3 and 4. Um, I think that 3 goes out of general support in March. We'll need to take a view on when we stop supporting 3 and can just drop those directories.
Should
Um,
we really stop on V10 on just drop the support on V11? Because I'm thinking like here in Just Eat we have a lot of components, at least on my team. I'm not sure if I'm able to do it before June and
yeah.
to like people like even I need to migrate to V10, direct V10. So I would like to migrate to the last version, and this
Yeah.
version is going to have a only
So
V11.
I don't want to rush to do it. Obviously, the risk is once it gets out of support, the problem it becomes a problem for the people who own those components because in March there's no longer support for them, right? So no bug fixes, no security fixes.
Yeah.
Um, and nowadays with agents, it ought to be much more straightforward for people to upgrade. You simply tell your agent, upgrade my repo to AWS 4, and it will just make a plan and then do the work. But I also agree, I don't want to basically just cut people off because it's a little bit irritating to us. But let's see whether we last as long as V11 or whether we um, decide to do it earlier. Um,
Maybe you can mark this after June, maybe kind of unmaintainable, or yeah, like if you have a bug on
well, we can
yeah,
do. We could cut a branch, right, where we
yeah,
say let's cut a release branch and then effectively um, with a pinned version like 10.x of brighter in June and say you're not going to get beyond 10.x of brighter until you upgrade because it's no longer in main, right? And in main, we'll drop those and move forward. So we remove the pain point for everyone on main. And then you're stuck at 10.4 or 5 or whatever, or brighter. But let's see, let's figure out how painful it is to keep maintaining it a bit longer. Universal DLQ. So Universal DLQ will probably be after Universal Scheduler just because this has more fixes to tests and stuff in it. So Universal DLQ is the one where you can now set up for any transport a routing key for a dead letter queue and a routing key for an invalid message channel. So what we've done is modify our reject logic. So that essentially, if you have a dead letter queue and you reject all of them, so we originally did it on things that had a DLQ, we'll now post to the dead letter queue. And what we do is we create a lazily create a producer at that point. We follow the make channel or whatever effectively that you've got set up for the consumer. It's essentially most of its properties based on the consumer, so it may not completely match the producer configuration. Um, uh, but then you say, okay, then we're going to basically produce out to that queue, right? Um, we also support invalid message channel, and that allows you to be more correct and say that if it's a message mapping error, it goes to the invalid message channel. At the minute, what we do is we say we're going to put to the invalid to the DLQ anything you reject, or we'll put message mapping errors there. But if you give us a routing key for both, we will split those two into two separate things that we send to. Right now, I don't want to try and support the model that says the dead letter queue is on a different transport to the transport you are using for the consumer. I just don't think that is actually a sane practice. I know some folks where we work do it. I'm sure there are folks outside doing it, but I just think that's a mistake. Um, However, maybe in some future release we will look at it again if people say, oh no, I have this really good reason why I swap transports for my dead letter queue. Um, if it is about what's the ability to of tooling to support dead letter queues, I think actually I would rather that we created a new, probably new repo inside Writer Command, because nowadays it's fairly easy with agents for us to create a little web tool, or even a CLI tool might be better for, because agents can use it more easily. So create a little CLI tool to help you work with your dead letter queues, right? So repost stuff, etc. I'd rather do that, I think, initially, because I suspect the reason that many people are pushing onto a different type of DLQ is they've got existing tools that they want to reuse. And I'm like, well, we'll just give you the tools and stop the madness at that point.
It's an interesting one for me because I mean, I don't have a great reason to use a different transport for a DLQ, but I feel like realistically, if you wanted a different transport, wouldn't you just use an inbox?
So,
Yeah, you can use maybe on Kafka, for example. People want to move from Kafka to SNS, I don't know. Depending on the
But
case. So and RabbitMQ just for failure to message, so you can have to retry that letter queues and
yeah, I just think it's a really bad habit, Rafa. And I know some
yeah,
people here do it, but I think it's a really terrible habit.
for me, it feels like we should have, one channel, one path. And effectively, if you're having three different transports, I know you can argue that's an abstraction that feeds in, but you certainly lose things like order delivery of messaging if you're replaying off a different transport. I mean,
Yeah, and I
maybe you
think
don't care.
there are other issues with basically swapping between transports when you do it, right? Is your replay becomes a bit more complicated. How do you and also how do you know that that switch between transports hasn't actually affected what you're sending, right?
Yeah,
Because it may affect things like headers or the, other items, right? If you send a Kafka message with 50 headers to an SNS endpoint, you would truncate 40 of those headers. So it's lossy, and I don't think it's great practice. I assume that the reason people are doing it is because they have tooling which is already built around that DLQs on that other transport. I don't assume anyone's doing it because they have some weird reason for believing that is better. I could be wrong. People have weird reasons for believing all sorts of things are better, and it frustrates us, right? But um, that one, I'd really want to understand why you want to do that. And if it's a tooling issue, we can just, it's 2026, we can get an agent to build some tooling around DLQs. All right. So that'd probably be the second of the big ones. I want to try and get these in by the weekend. So by now. This one came in from Johnny. He had some tokens to burn. So he basically, Azure Service Bus is one of the places we hadn't rolled out the compile time logging. So I think it's probably just
Did a quick review
Probably,
last night on that one. It looks good.
yeah, we can probably just merge this one. Feel free to merge it, Paul, if you think it's all right. Um, I'm sure Johnny can merge it himself. He's probably got enough rights, but you can feel free to merge it for him. So it looks like, we're not marking our homework. Okay, so this one, watch this. So we have having a consistent pattern of build failures at the minute, and two things seem to be causing build failures. One of them is that none of my universal DLQ, universal etc. stuff is basically able to get past the build step, and the build keeps getting cancelled by GitHub at 40 minutes. Now, when I look in the GitHub output, it doesn't look like the tests are the cause of that problem, but I can't see where else basically we're getting that grief, and it runs through V9 and V10. So because Tom had given us this change which says we no longer need statics for essentially the outbox producer mediator from command processor, the old problem that we need to run our tests sequentially in theory goes away. Plus, we don't need to call clear service bus anymore because we're not trying to clear static dependencies. So I effectively said to an agent, I want you to do a number of things. I want you to effectively remove all the clear service bus calls, and then I want to test that the test will pass, right? And then I want you to run uh, I want you to remove the command processor collection attribute, and then I want you to check all the tests still pass, um, so that we can speed up our tests, right? And that's mostly working. So what it's actually been pretty useful. So it went through and removed all the clear service bus. It just basically wrote Python script together and basically replaced them all. Um, uh, we also emptied the body. Was doing some cleanup around mementos, but we've kind of decided to empty body clear service bus. So it's still there because it's a public method. We can't really remove it till V11, but it does nothing. So then effectively we've been just running all the tests. The slight thing it has picked up on is there are a few test collisions on the pipeline builder memento stuff, which wouldn't affect running applications because you're not trying to blow away and regenerate pipeline builder, but we do have a clear cache for that. So it's inserting a few pipeline builder clear cache calls, but there's a much smaller number than there were of the old command processor clear bus calls. And then effectively when we've got that, I'm hoping that so it now the build builds much, it seems to go much faster, at least gets to the point where it's failing on those tests. So this one is a little bit, I need to get this one running and then merged in so that effectively we can successfully build again. Then I can merge that into Universal DLQ and Universal Scheduler. Universal Scheduler has some other test fixes in it. So the next thing I'll do then is try and merge in Universal Scheduler, and then I'll take that into DLQ and the one we're about to talk about in a second, which is don't act. Well, we can talk about this problem in a second. We've still got time, which is the merge queue problem that will emerge for us with agents. But yeah. All right, but that's I think really positive because it enables us to use Tom's fix, and agents are just tend to be better than I am, right? At basically using tools like Python or SED or whatever to make global refactorings like that. Whereas it would have taken me days of, going through find all, deleting them or whatever, and then effectively running stuff and rerunning stuff. Agent just does it in the background during the day while I'm doing other things, and I can come back to the results. So it's definitely useful use of agents to try and clean up tests. So hopefully when those three are in, our tests should be reliable and faster again. All right. They've just been a bit unreliable and a bit lots of blinkers. Agents are good at figuring out blinkers. When you and I give up, you just tell the agent this test is erratic and it keeps at it like a rat on a rope until effectively it can figure out what's wrong with it.
I,
So I'm hopeful that these three will make a big dent. We'll probably still have some blinkers, but the trick is take the output, give it to an agent, tell the agent to just relentlessly hunt down while we get a blinker.
I've been playing with agents for fixing tests like that in other areas, and I've found them to be like the most useful thing we've actually ever found them to do. Just being like a dog with a bone trying to fix a
Yeah,
test, it's
yeah,
magic.
yeah. Because when you or I, the thing is, I think you or when I notice what it does by comparison to us is it's much more likely to try a given strategy a certain way a number of times, give up, decide that's not the right way, try something else. And it's just better at doing that than you and I am. I
It
get
just iterates
fixated on a given
faster.
direction
Yeah.
and then
Yeah. I just find the whole it's like run, go, run, go, run, go, run, and just keep in the loop until it fixes it.
yeah,
That's and it does it quicker than you or I would. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
maybe we picked the right answer earlier in the iteration, but not just the fact I don't have to think about that. And I've used anti-gravity for it as well. Just go deal with that over there and tell me when you're good.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. There's definitely at some point what, orgs are going to start evolving towards is bots that pick up stuff that basically fails. I think the thing is when you've got a PR open and you've got stuff, you're obviously working through something with a bot. I don't know splitting to another bot makes sense, but I think effectively um, saying to your local agent, once you've pushed, use GitHub, monitor the build, auto
Hmm.
fix basically anything that you see in the CI output is definitely worth it. We don't have that at the minute in what the way Bright has got its stuff written, and I may adjust it to say, hey, in our specs, um, there's a whole monitor build output, watch for errors, relentless, create basically, and then relentlessly pursue those errors as your kind of your last step in the process. All right, don't act. So this is another internal request at Jet. And actually, in some weird way, it fits with kind of universal scheduler and universal delay. So some folks are doing internally were saying, okay, there's a problem for them in a kind of Kafka stream processing model where our model is says, hey, if you have an application exception uh, we act, log it, and we act, right? Or what you could do is retry using poly, or eventually throw a defer message action, right? That's what we kind of give you, right? And um, partly, and it isn't the root cause of that problem, partly, of course, because we haven't had the universal scheduler, you can't necessarily use defer message action successfully with Kafka, and also it would deorder, right? They don't really DLQ is not their answer because they don't want to basically act the message and moved on and just put it in the DLQ. They want to just keep reiterating that one. Now, in theory, they could do it with um, resilience policy for policy that says retry forever, right? And that would, in theory, do it, but it's just basically, blocking the pump, saying, I'm just going to sit here for eternity trying to process that for you. But I think there's a wider idea that basically I think emerges from it, which is to essentially add another action alongside our. Oh, we have in this one we also have an explicit in the DLQ reject message action now to add to defer message action. So you can throw an explicit reject message action to say, um, you know what? I just want to put this on the DLQ and give up on it. We also have an attribute for this, which basically you can put on, which is an on error reject message. In other words, if errors bubble out of my pipeline and I'm the sort of outermost attribute, I will say, okay, if I catch an exception, I know that I'm now going to reject this message. So it goes to D. So same thing as before, we'll still acknowledge it, but we will put it on the DLQ for you when we do that. Um, this one also, by the way, it's not there yet. It needs a attribute saying, "Hey, I want an outer loop that does a defer that basically says, hey, if you reach this far out, what you should do is actually defer. Defer will always, after it reaches the handled count, end up with a reject, right? So you can use defer on the outermost loop and then reject. But don't act. What we're going to add is a throw a new don't act action, right? And the don't act action, what it does is basically calls a new method on channel called knack. In principle, Adding a public method to knack is okay. It's an addition, not a change. So what knack does is it says not acknowledge. So on things where knack is meaningful, such as RabbitMQ, SQS, Azure Service Bus, we do an actual knack. So we unlock that message, but we don't then delete it. So somebody else could pick it up. So we're saying we had a try. We don't want to actually delete it. We want to make it available for somebody else to try. So we're going to don't hack it. On something like Kafka, it just doesn't, it won't basically commit the offset. There's a pause as well when we do a don't act. So you basically have a time pause before you consume again, which lets you basically then uh, say, okay, well, I'm just going to pause and effectively let that flush out. And a little bit, even where you're doing an unlock, I think it's kind of important to have that little bit of a pause and don't act. Otherwise, you may end up with that thing picking up the message again. So in principle, you could launch a new version of a component with a don't act on it and say, actually, if there's a fail, don't act. And then actually we get picked up potentially at some point by the old version of the component, right? Where effectively the old version component will go, oh, actually, I'm going to pick it up and I'll succeed with it. There's a risk of poison pill for something like Kafka. So what I'm saying is we will still increment the unacceptable message count. And if you've got your unacceptable message count set to a value, at that point we crash. Well, we exit orderly, right? Saying I'm giving up processing because I can't process. Because we still need to give you a route which says I won't just be poison pilled to death. Um, so again, we give you an outer loop attribute saying, on error, don't act. We're also going to put a attribute in a parameter to our feature switch saying don't act, which means currently if you have a feature switch and you read a message and the feature switch is off, we still mark the message as consumed. So we consume, we just don't act. And it does seem reasonable that you might want to better have a feature switch which says don't consume. And I think most likely real use of that is that it's via external config. So you can flip off an agent to stop it consuming. Um, but it won't, you can say turn it off and it'll just sit there waiting and not consuming messages and well, keeping to read just paused on that one message. And again, you eventually might, if you've got an unhandled exception count configured, at some point it would eventually go, I'm going to self-terminate or whatever. All right, there's a lot. And that's part of, I think, what we are about to hit is, in theory, agents make it possible for us to eat our backlog, right?
Mm.
Now, I think that there are two types of tasks we're doing. One type of task is I am thinking about this task and I'm exploring it, right? So that's true for me, or will be when I get back to it soon, on our workflow support. So there, I may be writing bits of code by hand, asking agents questions, getting to generate little bits until I think I've got a theory of how it works, and I've got it all in memory stuff, and I want to go, okay, go and build out a persistent version of this interface for say MS SQL to store basically in-flight jobs, etc. But but some of our other stuff where we've got existing code, we want to change to that code. A lot of agents can figure out, okay, I can do that work for you. We have the process actually we've got there in specs folder works quite well. So basically you do a new, you can include an issue number in the new, and it will then read that from an issue to say that's what you're after. There's got a requirements. You can create then a requirements document. Then basically from requirements, you create an ADR and stick the ADR, and that's where basically your design goes. So you create an ADR, and then you create tasks. And I'm just working on, it's not quite it's got some kinks, let's say, to iron out. The ability to then say, actually, this task I don't need to observe, right? So something like I've got one, I did one recently. I've got one, yeah, it's not here yet. I've got one I'm working on. It's not actually a PR for it at the minute, which is to increase our test coverage. So what I've done is done a whole lot of analysis and said, where are we lacking test coverage? And then create some tests for that test coverage. because I'm just adding tests to improve our test coverage. Once I've seen the task list and the plan and approve that, what I may do is stick that in a Ralph loop. So there's another spec task called Ralph tasks, which essentially says take this task list because we write our task list in our existing model with a hey, you must basically approve the test. Hey, you must approve the implementation with approvals. It what it does is it takes that task list and say, I want to rewrite that so it doesn't have approval steps. What it tends to do actually is sometimes is say, I'm going to write a thing which basically says, go and read this file, but you don't have to obey the approval step. Okay. Uh, Once I get that working, then we also have a Ralph loop. You can just say, okay, run this in a Ralph loop, because I'm just doing this as a chunk through some problem, like lack of test coverage, and improve it. Um, but that will lead to merge queue issues. I'm already in my hitting this because I've effectively got a work machine and a personal machine, which I've got two main tasks on, Universal DLQ and Universal Scheduler. And then as I hit problems, I'm doing git add work tree for this thing. I want to treat that as a separate problem to solve. So they've each got three or four sub items which are spun up off it, which say, um, hey, here's a thing I encountered while doing this, which I also need to solve and maybe solve first. And then you end up with a whole load of PRs, right? And then I've also got a bit of a problem which kind of says I really ought to merge this one, then this one, then this one, right? Um, I don't have a particular answer, but I'm just saying that is going to become a problem for us, I think, is merge queue problem. We don't suffer as yet. It might happen. We're not a high profile enough project that we have a lot of drive-by shootings by people we don't know, um, of PRs by agents, but it might happen, right? We have a process under which we can, in theory, reject them. And that is you need to have an ADR, is what we say basically now. You need to have an issue and you need to create an ADR as the first step. We have a workflow. You can use ours, it's in the repo, but you need to create an ADR. That think will stall or gives us basically something where we can respond and say, hey, you need to follow our process. You need to raise an ADR, and then we can basically review the code. I'm not against people using agents to make submissions though, because I do. And I think that is, if we're in
Mhm.
2026, most people are going to start writing code using agents.
Yeah.
If not, I don't necessarily believe 100% of the time, but I think maybe 80% of the time. Right.
Well, the thing I'm always trying to preach internally here is it's okay to write the code, however you write the code, as long as you review it, understand it, and are happy with it. If
Yeah,
people
I'm
want to
trying to
speed
get a blog.
themselves up with an agent, it's great.
Yeah, I might try and get a blog post out, Paul, which is I think is about this idea of theory building, right? You've got to build the theory somewhere, and that might be in the markdown with the design and the ADR. It might be in the code
Yeah.
because you don't really know how to write the ADR yet. Once you have the theory, you need to communicate the theory to the agent. But how you get to the theory is the bit we're not talking about enough, right? We're talking
Yeah.
once I have a theory, I can give the agent the theory and say, go build it.
For
But
me, this is an evolution on things like we've done before here, where I'll come in with a um, not draft code, but effectively have a whack at it so we have something to talk around and
yeah,
then work out the way forward. It's not, it wasn't there to go in. It was there so we can work out if a direction feels good in our guts.
yeah, 100%, 100%. So I do it a little bit at the minute. What I tend to do on Brighter is, if I don't think I understand it, I might tackle doing it in an in memory.
Yeah.
Uh, and then I say, let's add it to in memory and see what it looks like, right? And then I can raise an ADR based on that a little bit with the agent. Then I can show you all the ADR and what we have so far, right, as an example in the in memory. And then we can say, okay, well, let's roll that out. That actually makes sense. And that may help us because I think, but because at some point there's that notion of I need to build a theory that I tell the agent about. Other things, the theory may be really obvious, right? Which just may be a thing we need to do, which we all understand exactly what it is we're doing, and I can just kick the agent off on it straight away. I think part of me also thinks this is an answer to the junior developer question, which is junior developers need to have the theory before they set the agent off, and it may mean they have to write more code before they ask the agent to help them because they need to do that to get the theory working. But I'll write a blog post about it and share it at some point. But yeah, we will hit it at some point. I don't quite know in an open source project exactly what the solution is to work increasing. I don't think anyone quite does, but it's something we need to think about because we could move a lot faster, right? If you go and look at, we have 52 issues, right? Um, and let's just, start with a few of them, right? Warnings as errors. We could easily say we want to build with warnings as errors. Stick a Ralph loop on it and say remove all the warnings, right? Then turn on warnings as errors. Um, .NET new template. I don't know that's so necessary anymore, but it's an easy task for an agent if we say write a .NET new template for getting. Um, uh, we could probably easily once Raf has done his test suite say we actually want a separate one. Um, to help out the folks that are now stuck on older versions of MQTT, but we want against five and want to use the low-level MQTT operations, right? Well, once we've got Rafa's thing done, that would be assailable with an agent with the instructions on how to write basically a producer and consumer and the docs, right? Um, this is just, hey, I mean, it's pretty much you could point an agent at the title and say, um, hey, we want to do cloud events JSON because we currently use our own proprietary structure for the message on our own Redis gateway. Why not just use cloud events JSON as the structure, right? So you can just set a flag. So loads of these, all of these effectively, they become we have Rafa's test suite, we have my instructions. We just keep iterating through these, right? Add supporting for these. This one is actually in progress. So is that one. Turn back to, yeah. So some of these, so create analyzer is the one that we've got someone currently looking at. We should mark that as in progress actually. Um, but we honestly could be at the point where it's realistic to say we could get through this backlog, right, within 6 months. The only thing slowing it down would be our capacity to monitor this. Even docs, right? This one needs to get done. But when I've done the DLQ, etc., we just need to update the docs. What I tend to find is you get all the repos down and you launch Claude at the brighter command level rather than down at this level, and you say, go and read these ADRs and write docs. And if it's got the ADRs and the code, it can write the docs. Um, so a whole load of this stuff. Redis should use brighter schedule support for EQ with delay. That's one we're currently working on, right? So I'm going to clear quite a few of these straight out of nowhere. Um, uh, and I would say if you want to play with agents, right, a whole load of this stuff now looks very assailable because they don't require theory. Most of them are just require implement this thing, which is an addition to how Brighter works. Right. Some of them require theory, right? Um, so this one maybe require a bit of theory, requires thinking about how does that work, right? But bulk support, did we do that one, Rafa? That's still outstanding.
Which one?
Add support to bulk post for SQS SMS?
No, we made for Azure. We need to do
Yeah.
for
But if we
SNS.
if we have it for Azure, then I suspect an
There's
agent could just pick that task up, right? You say,
Probably, yeah.
there
so
is
that's
one
what.
thing to note with those. I've noticed now that I'm in the AWS land, and
Mm,
they only allow up to 10 messages to be in a batch
yeah,
in a bulk send.
No, there is a limit at 10
It
message or 1 MB for SNS
it's whatever's
or
smaller, right?
10
SQS
mega.
is the same.
Yeah, you're right. And
yeah.
they want to do 1 MB for SNS, but for now it's two two
I,
hundred and something K. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I thought
yeah.
they had put it up. Either way, I know I was writing an outbox sweeper here, and I was like, oh, let's tick every 2 seconds and send batches of 500, and I was surprised, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah, we know all those. All right, but yeah, do you see what I mean, right? And so actually, it would become fundamentally because if you're paying, I mean, I'm paying for a Claude subscription, right? Claude Max subscription. Fundamentally, it makes economic sense to just burn tokens every
Mm.
day on knocking down an inbox item, right? Which we haven't got to. Because whereas before, 52 issues looked like, well, we're just prioritizing what we think is important based on feedback from people we work with internally, right? Suddenly it's kind of like, oh, we could just do it all. Particularly, I think the thing I'm really interested in, Rafa, is your um, test generation. So there's an old notion. I was going to write, I made a blog post about this as well. There's an old notion in Naughty. It's called software factories. So software factories was an earlier attempt to basically industrialize software development, and essentially it said we should only be doing novel tasks once rather. Let me say that again. We should the only things you should write code for are novel tasks. Everything else there exists a solution for. So why aren't we able to use that solution? Now, at the time, the software factories movement didn't have the tech we have now, so it failed, right? But the principles of what software factories were shooting for are now viable, right? Which is to say, the only fresh code I write should be code effectively that is essentially novel, right? There isn't a pattern or a framework, or now there isn't existing code that an agent can effectively have been trained on in order to understand how to implement it, right? And actually, what we may end up with is a software factory for transports, for outboxes, for inboxes, for Brighter, because you've given us a test suite. Test suites are what agents need to verify everything. And if we have instructions to say, here's how we tend to implement one of these, in theory, you just feed the agent the spec, and our factory, which is our test suite, that's why I think I've called it initially, might still be, I can't remember, in the um, repo structure. I think I called it factory or something. Where did I put it? Transports. I think at one point I renamed. Oh yeah, I had renamed this to factories, but I forgot the right name. I don't know whether it's quite skills, but effectively it ought to be possible for us to just generate a factory that says this is not a novel idea, right? We can just go and make one of these. So this just tells you how to make, for example, a producer. All right. So it tells you how do I get the test to pass? And in theory, we should be able to produce one of these that just goes away and says, oh, someone's got this new piece of middleware. Great. We will just point our factory at it and it will come back in a day's time with a working implementation of that for Brighter. Um, So I think we're starting to assemble parts. That's why I'm really excited about your test stuff, Rafa. And that's also why I'm really excited that an agent today, for the first time that I've seen an agent that I've been looking after do it, worked with your test suite it's under the Universal Scheduler, the thing that just went in. So it's a fix that just went in at a last commit. I would sort by commit because it's basically becoming huge. Um,
Yeah, 300 files.
I
Yeah.
know, but effectively, I could have broken up into a whole load of different per transport changes, but it's just the same changes across all the transports, so it becomes a little bit hard work. But I suspect it's down somewhere in one of the, yeah. So, what did it alter? I think it's
Yeah, I have.
finding.
I think it's the inbox. I
Right.
have
GitHub
changed
is
it.
so slow sometimes that I'm clicking on it, but nothing happens. That's GitHub. GitHub is dying. Uh,
Um,
oh, this is just an error on Kafka. Can't know about it.
can you go up to your screen? Go to the top of the GitHub page. There is. Oh, okay. You are already in preview. Because I remember to see a feature where you can. Well, it should be fast. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, okay.
No, it's just not fast.
Yeah.
I struggle consistently with GitHub's ability to do things at any speed. Um, so yeah, you can see stuff here where we're effectively, you know, there's a lot of this stuff is we hit bugs
Yeah.
or reviews are effectively just turning up. So the Claude agent reviewer on CI plus Claude you're working locally, there's a whole lot of bugs the reviewer just picks up, which aren't being exposed by our test necessarily. So for example, this one says, hey, actually, what happens on an exception here when you're trying to effectively, if you fail, for example, to create the producer and you've removed the message before you've effectively sent it, you'd lose the message. So effectively we add it. And that's just our in-memory one, but we want the in-memory one to be good enough to be usable if necessary.
Mm.
But uh, outbox test async, yeah. So some of this was about basically uh, struggling. We would get tests failing because of the
Yeah.
accuracy of results, basically. So it's just altering that, and but it's able to work with your base tests and then regenerate them. So it figured that out. So somewhere up here, there should be a new skill. Yeah, here we go. So agent instructions is where I put on. So that's me creating a dot agent instructions so that I can give that to Claude and other places to do lookup, right? And so
Yeah.
it's saying,
Nice.
well, where does the test trying to live? Where do the templates live? Configuration, how to modify generated test, regenerate from each test project directory. So it made a mistake when it tried to do it. First of all, tried to do it from the root. So it learned that. Um, Check best test classes, CI flakiness guidelines. Um, so it's also starting to update stuff saying, hey, watch for these issues. They're ones that are causing us flaky tests. Um, Actually, this one probably here is not really uh, outboxes. Really needs to end up in in messaging gateway flaky tests. Uh, but I can fix that. Yeah. All right. That was a lot.
Yeah.
All good?
All good.
All right. Let me kill the live stream. Uh, if I can figure out how we do that. I think I have to stop sharing first. I know it's crazy. While you are sharing, you do not have controls for the live stream thing that it does. Yeah.